with an opening ceremonial blessing by Reverend Maureen Chase.
Grandmother, grandfather, power of the four directions, I send a voice. Creator, in all of your names, I ask that you come and make this a blessed event for us all, as we gather together to celebrate women healing.
It's really a blessing and a great honor to be able to welcome all of you here today on behalf of the Center for the Study of World Religions. The Center for the Study of World Religions aims to create not only dialogue and relationship among people of different faith traditions, but also among people who are scholars in the field of religious studies and people who are practitioners, communities of faith, on the ground, living the traditions that we study. And that bridge of living relationship is so very important. The Women Healing Women project of the Center for the Study of World Religions and of the Religion Health Initiative is a very wonderful example of both of those things, both the interdisciplinarity and interreligious study of healing as one of the great arts of religiousness, and doing that in relationship with women who are practitioners of healing. And it's a project that Susan Sarad has imagined and drawn other people into, most of you who are in this room, and a project that has given the Center for the Study of World Religions a great amount of pride and satisfaction. So it's a special pleasure to me to say a word of welcome to you and a deep word of thanks to Susan Sarad.
You know, we're sitting here in one of the typical lecture rooms at Harvard Divinity School, and I'm delighted that Maureen's crystal bowl and Native American invocation are now part of the spirit of this room. My guess is that the more typical openings to classes are take out the text we've been studying or something of that sort. I know that the people gathered here today represent lots of different niches from the Boston area. Some of you are friends or colleagues of women who are presenting their work. Some of you are Harvard Divinity School students or in some way associated with Harvard University. So I wanted to say just a few introductory words about what this group is, what this gathering is. Women Healing Women is a program that was has been funded by the Germeshausen Foundation and sponsored by Harvard University Center for the Study of World Religions. Women Healing Women brought together 20 women healers for a period of 18 months during 2002 till today. The program was designed with two chief goals. The first was open dialogue among healers, and the group that has been gathering together includes a broad range of clinicians, practitioners, nurses, physicians, psychotherapists, alternative and complementary healers, spiritual healers, and clergy. And the idea of bringing these healers together was to think about ways to establish better avenues of communication that can translate into better serving the health and spiritual needs of older women. And the second aspect of this program was to encourage and facilitate members of the group in designing and carrying out pilot projects that hopefully can be replicated in the future. The model for Women Healing Women comes out of several different sources. Women Healing Women was born in a conversation that I had with Nancy Clavins, who's the director of the Germeshausen Foundation. I was telling her about a project that I had been involved in with Israel. Within Israel, it was an interfaith dialogue group between Jewish and Arab nurses. And the idea of that group was that if people who share a professional background or professional context come together for dialogue, the dialogue has more substance to it and more meaning to it than just a random group of people coming together for interfaith dialogue. So that Jewish and Arab nurses interfaith dialogue program in Israel had been one of the most exciting things I'd ever participated in. It was incredibly eye-opening for the Jewish nurses. It was new for them to hear from colleagues, from their Arab colleagues, that they would sometimes go into patients' rooms in the hospitals and the patients' families would yell at them, "Get out of here, I won't let you touch my relative." And the Arab nurses were fascinated and appalled to hear that the Jewish nurses felt that they were really not given any authority or power within the hospital system, and that they were really treated often like servants by the physicians and by the hospital administrators. So this has been a really incredibly interesting model for me. The second stream that poured into Women Healing Women was the interfaith dialogue model as we know it in the United States, and that's something that the Center for the Study of World Religions has been involved with for many, many years. So we've construed faith in a really interesting way in the Women Healing Women program. We've construed faith as professional faith, the healing modality that people believe in. And we know that people who are healers practice within their modalities because they truly believe that their modalities are good and right and true and effective. So we felt that bringing together people who really deeply believe in the kind of healing that they do to meet people who deeply believe in other kinds of healing might lead to some interesting questions and maybe even some interesting answers. The third stream that poured into the creation of Women Healing Women was another project at Harvard called Women Waging Peace. And we were fascinated by the idea of taking a linguistic usage of waging, which is usually coupled with war, and turning it upside down and talking about women waging peace. Now, how does that transfer to Women Healing Women? It transfers to Women Healing Women because, and this is what the title of my little talk is, that the personal is political and the political is personal, women in the United States are sick far more often than men. So just the idea of women healing women is kind of an interesting concept when we realize that women make more visits to physicians' offices each year than men do. They purchase more prescription medication than men do. They purchase more over-the-counter medication than men do. They significantly outnumber men in the use of alternative healing modalities, and they are far more likely than men to assess themselves as ill when asked to make subjective statements regarding their health. So what does this have to say about politics? What this has to say about politics is that this doesn't make any sense. We know that women outlive men by several years in all Western countries, so how can it be that women are sicker than men if women are outliving men? What's going on here? Well, anthropologists and sociologists and social scientists have given a lot of thought as to why in the United States women are sicker than men. And the kinds of reasons that have come out of the conversations that we've been having in the social sciences include the notion that women's bodies have become highly medicalized in our society, that physiological processes that perhaps in other cultural settings at other times in history would have been perceived as just normal, natural physiological processes, menstruation, menopause, childbirth, lactation, have increasingly come to be seen in our society as something that needs a medical intervention. So a large number of those extra visits to the doctor that women are making and a large number of those extra medicines that women are buying are because of an understanding that women's bodies need medical interventions at these life cycle events. I wonder whether the advent of Viagra and that whole genre of medications is going to start to flip this, because for the first time we're seeing a really dominant discourse that says that normative developments in men's bodies are pathological and need medical treatment. So I'm curious to see how this idea of medicalization of gendered bodies will evolve in America over the next couple of years. Other reasons that women are sicker than men. You might hear on television that people are sick because they don't exercise enough, or because they don't eat healthy food, or because they smoke. The most dominant cause of illness in the United States and around the world is quite simply poverty. And women as a group in the United States are poorer than men as a group. Women are more likely to be living at or below the poverty line than are men. So I would suggest that that's one of the reasons that women are sick more than men. It's another way in which the personal body is really reflecting larger political processes. I think that another reason that women are sick more than men is that women are more likely to be victims of sexual abuse than men. And we have a large body of research that shows that women who have been victims of sexual abuse in the past continue over their entire lives to experience more illness than women who have not been victims of sexual abuse. In other words, a woman who was raped when she was 18, when she's 60, is still going to be going to the doctor more often than a woman who was not raped or a woman who was not abused. Now, the reasons that she's going to the doctor might or might not be gynecological. The point is that there's a corporeal, a bodily experience of distress that really continues for decades and decades. So that is possibly another reason that women are sicker than men. Finally, I'd like to suggest that women are sicker than men because in our society, we allow women to express weakness and we allow women to say that they're sick. And I think that that's a luxury that's often denied to men. I think that in many sectors of our society, men are made to feel very uncomfortable if they admit that they're sick, if they admit that they're weak. So again, we have a social process that kind of constructs women's bodies as more likely to be sick than men's bodies. But what does that say about healers? Well, here's another interesting statistic. I told you before that women are sick much more than men, but men die before women. Well, women greatly outnumber men in the medical professions. If we count up women, direct care workers, certified nursing assistants, nursing home aides, licensed practical nurses, registered nurses, physical therapists, occupational therapists, psychotherapists, there are many, many, many more women working in the healing professions than men. If I add in the complementary and alternative therapies, it becomes even more dramatic. Women greatly outnumber men as energy healers, as Reiki practitioners, as reflexologists, as massage therapists. But when we look at the upper echelons of the healing professions, both within the biomedical world and within the alternative therapy world, we find that men outnumber women. So when we look at hospital administrators, and when we look at the really high prestige medical specialties, and I believe that increasingly when we look at the really lucrative and high prestige complementary and alternative therapies as well, we're finding that men outnumber women. So that's what I found sort of interesting in this women healing women concept. We have a society in which women are sicker than men and women outnumber men in the healing professions, but women are really not making the policies that shape the bodily experiences for themselves or for their families. So that's where this Women Healing Women program came from. I want to say a few words about what we've learned in the course of this program. In bringing together women who come from really different faith traditions, healing faith traditions, we found that for the most part, there was really very little hostile disagreement. I think that the women in our group really had a strong consensus that we care about our patients, we care about our clients, we're interested in other healing modalities. It's pretty likely that other healing modalities can be helpful on some occasions for some people. However, there were two issues that did emerge in our group, I don't want to say as bones of contention, but as issues around which there was not a consensus. What's fascinating to me is that the camps around these issues never were stable, that our group kept in a state of flux all the time. So there certainly were not two contingents within Women Healing Women, but there were sometimes sets of opinions that did not sit entirely well together, and I think that these are really very, very interesting, and they both tie back into my overarching theme of the political is indeed personal and the personal is indeed political. When I first started to map out Women Healing Women, I believed that the angry dialogue would emerge between the biomedical practitioners and the complementary and alternative medical practitioners. that the complementary and alternative medical practitioners would feel that they are being persecuted by biomedicine, that they're not being respected, they're not being acknowledged, and the biomedical practitioners would feel that my patients are wasting a ton of money on stuff that's not tested, not documented, and who even knows if it's safe. In fact, this never came up. This was never an issue over the course of the 18 months that we met. However, what did come up more than once was issues of economics and who pays for health care and what kinds of health care get to be covered by things like insurance or by Medicaid and Medicare. So I think that if in any way there was a divide in our group, which was certainly not a permanent divide, my sense is that to some extent it was between the women who treat primarily low-income patients and the women who treat primarily more affluent patients. I think that one of the things that we've accomplished in Women Healing Women, and you'll hear about this more when you hear about the projects, is that we've tried to facilitate bringing some of the incredible wisdom that's developed in the world of complementary and alternative healing over the past few decades, wisdom that typically is available only to women who can pay. We've tried to facilitate and fund offering some of that wisdom into other communities and to lower income women. The second issue that arose that was somewhat contentious in our group, and again, I think this is fascinating, and it was not stable camps, was an issue of professional boundaries. And who gets to decide what are appropriate professional boundaries? What are appropriate professional ethics? Who gets to certify what is an appropriate way for a healer to behave? And this issue came to a head when one of our healers talked about a client she'd been working with who had very, very complex, overwhelming, multifaceted, intractable issues that just were not responding to a long stream of interventions, both biomedical and alternative and spiritual interventions. And this member of our group invited her client to come live in her house with her for a week. And some of the women in our group were very uncomfortable with this. Where are the boundaries? Is this what a healer should be doing? You know, are we allowing relationships to kind of transcend what should be an appropriate division between a healer and someone who's being healed? Well, other women in our group pointed to radically different models of healing, and particularly to some non-Western models of healing, a shamanic model in which it would be absolutely normal for a shaman to go out into the jungle, forest, or desert, or plains with someone who's sick for a week or a couple of weeks, with an understanding that sometimes when someone has an intractable set of problems, what they need is just to get the heck out of their home environment and be someplace else for a while. So this is another one of the issues that I found interesting to follow as our group developed. I'm now going to end my remarks, and I would like to introduce you to the women who have been part of Women Healing Women. And I'm just going to ask women to stand or wave, whatever is most comfortable to you, as I call out your names. Not all of the Women Healing Women participants have done projects, so you're not going to hear from all of them tonight. Aviva Bach is here. And is Michelle here? Is Mary Cedrone here? Barbara, Ileana, Ellen, Lydia is here. Lydia Netson. Is Kathy here or Judy? Barbara, Malka. We then had a series of speakers and mentors, and I don't think that any of them are able to come here tonight, but I do want to acknowledge their contributions to Women Healing Women. First and foremost, Mary Ruggie. Is Mary here? Hi, Mary. Has been our most faithful mentor and has really held our hand throughout the development of this entire project. Judy Narsigian, the executive director of Our Bodies Ourselves, helped us right from the beginning. Zobeida Bonilla, who also works with the Our Bodies Ourselves collective, Tijuana Malone, Catherine Park, Nancy Richardson, and Phyllis Silverman. And then I'd like to especially thank the staff who worked together, and I really do hope that in our staff group, we succeeded in building an alternative model of egalitarian relations, which again is maybe not so normative at Harvard. But our staff consisted of Jan Cook, who the dialogue facilitator, and Rosemary Lloyd, co-facilitator. And Rosemary is going to be ordained in a couple of months. All right. That's her big news. Rebecca Klein, our events coordinator. And I want to tell you that we had a budget with the Germeshausen Foundation that covered dinners for women at the Women Healing Women gatherings. The idea was that we should be nurturing the healers, that they're out working all day. If they're going to come to a long meeting at night, they got to get a good hot meal. And Rebecca provided such good food at such a low price that we had extra money for the projects at the end. So thank you, Rebecca. Masum, is Masum here? Masum is a graduate student and School of Education and served as scribe, taking notes throughout our process so that we can document what we were doing. And finally, I want to introduce my dear friend and my coworker and co-organizer of Women Healing Women from the beginning to this very minute, who is also going to read us one of her poems, Susan Lloyd McGarry.
So it's just lovely to be here with all of you, with all the women that I've been with for more than a year and a half, and just with all of you in the room. And the poem that I'm going to read is kind of out of the Celtic tradition. It's in the style of what might be called a charm or an incantation. And it's kind of asking for maybe a different healing than exactly a physical healing. I wrote it for a friend of mine who's a painter who was blocked and who wasn't able to paint. And this was kind of my charm or incantation for her so that she could take up the paintbrush again. But I'd like to dedicate it to the women who will be following me and to also all of you here in this room, that you may do whatever your work is, that you may do your best work. That you may paint tomorrow. For Jana Coffin. Now in the dark of night and the deep of rain, I call on the power that is for you, with you, within you. May it banish all doubts, scurrying and bold-faced, keening and clever, angry and whispered. Paint your daughter's voice, your mother's grip on life, your father's ignorance. The times you were abandoned, the times you have abandoned. The storm in you, the calm at your center. Paint the lips of the rose, the mud from which it comes, thorns. The openness of the Shillenagig, the carved stone woman with her two mouths agape, her hands holding wide her sex, invoking its authority, calling us to go in, in, in. You have tasted the flowering, the fruiting, and the dying afterwards. Paint them.
It is my great, great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Edith Turner. Edith is professor of anthropology at the University of Virginia. She is the author of so many books, I couldn't possibly name them all, but I do want to mention a few that I know that many of the Divinity School students have read. Experiencing Ritual, The Hands Feel It, which is on her work among the Inupiat in the Arctic, Image and Pilgrimage in Christian Society, and that's on top of another whole life of work together with her husband, Victor Turner, mostly in Africa among the Ndembu. In many, many ways, Edie is the true elder of the anthropological community today, and her own intensely powerful and ongoing interest is in rituals of healing, which is why we have invited her to come share some of her thoughts with us today. Edie.
I presume I can put my papers on there. Yes, acts of women's collective power in 3 rituals. This is collective, healing women. I'm a field anthropologist, and let me say that I and quite a few other anthropologists are regarding practitioners of health and healing as the mentors and teachers of anthropologists. The people with their hands on the problems of the world truly know what those problems are and live them, not the observers and theorists. However, we in anthropology are now developing a research called the anthropology of experience, which is an advance for us. That is, we sometimes join in with the people in religion and healing when there's work to be done. In this paper, I bring to you some pictures out of our craft of women healing women in the modes of their religions. We anthropologists have had the luck to study non-industrial peoples in small, face-to-face, on-the-ground communities, unlike the socially shattered technological life of America today. You may see how I can help with those stories. What one finds in my 3 cases is the existence of a strong natural community sense, mostly kinship-based, with rich traditions, even with poetic stories behind the traditions. What I'm trying to do is to seduce you with those stories. Maybe there are ways modern life can be enriched. In my classroom, at least, the students perform these very rituals, perform them, and experience a sliver of the actual feeling that the ritual gives. That gives a lots of happiness.
I'm just going
I better go over there. I'm worried about not being able to spread my papers on here.
We can close it? Okay.
That's right, yeah. Sorry about that first bit. Here it is to be remembered that a big key to what I'm doing is to understand that I'm working the opposite way around from the way Durkheim was working, the opposite. I don't explain away spirits as the personified rule of society. I start with people and join in with their sense of spirits and then submit myself to their instructions. Then one can sense spirits, so there's no explaining away, and it isn't in question. Yeah. Right. Yes, I'm so glad of this audience. It's a marvelous working audience. So then, let's learn from the world's examples of women healers. First about them, we know who knows best. What women healers tend to do in the third world is to encourage the help of the other women in the suffering woman's life, whether illness, abuse, desertion, death or ruin of one's children, etc. And the best helpers are the women of the sufferer's family, or special women workmates or association friends when they get together. They can get on the sufferer's wavelength. They know the sufferer well. Official bodies don't know her as they do. It's the same about anthropologists. They don't really know what's going on unless they are linked to the event, seriously and genuinely, unless they go far in adopting the prevailing religion for the sake of people. The people do know. They seek help from their god or saint or apical ancestors. That's a horrible word. And so-called mythical hero or something. Whatever the scholars call such a figure, whatever, but it is spirit help they want. Modern therapy is beginning to take this course. I love it. For my part, I'm trying to bring into awareness the principles that hold generally learnt from our mentors, the wise women of the outback. And this field is as good as any place, anywhere, to show it. First, that people do know best, and gentleness is the way to go. Women can achieve this healing. May the good arts of listening bring us to some hints of it, even through pictures in the mind. Now, story and healing in South Central Africa. This is a story. In 1954, I experienced a dance of women in Zambia among the Lunda and Dembu. It was a ritual with an original event at its root, a sacred event long before. The dance itself is part of the healing ritual called Nkula, from the root kukula, which means to grow, to mature, ripening to the full, because it treats and cures women who have trouble with menstruation or with giving birth. I first am going to tell you the original event, which is a story about a chief's daughter who was filial and kind to her aged and mocked father. The husband of this same girl stole her chiefly rights from her, the husband did, leaving her suffering and childless. But she was given the spiritual ritual of Nkula with rights that linked her with the spirits of the dead kin, and she became fertile herself. In the 1950s of my fieldwork in Zambia, the link between childlessness and this story with its cure was well known. I suggest this pairing is fairly common, this is very interesting, in all the religions, that of an original sacred event and a ritual in key with it, which is the necessary completion of the Spirit's intent, that curious performance in the human realm, ritual being the material artifact of the Spirit being, which is in a way so like conception of a baby. If you can think that one out. Now, the original event was like this, described by Dias de Carvalho in 1890, this is a Portuguese guy, and by Vic Turner in 1955. Around the end of the 15th century, Yalamaku, chief of Nkalani of the Congo, had 3 children, 2 sons and 1 young daughter. The daughter's name was Luigi Nkonde from her mother's name. As the chiefdom grew in prosperity, the sons took to drinking, idleness, and the molestation and despoilment of the people. The chief was furious and disinherited them, but the sons beat him up, leaving him bathed with his own blood, and Luigi, returning from her gardens, heard his groans and stood aghast, and she cleansed the old man's wounds and heard his story, and the neighboring chiefs gathered around. The dying Yalamaku then informed them of his last wishes. His daughter was to be his sole heir, together with the chiefs newly formed to form a new paramount chiefdom, the Lunda. And Yalamaku solemnly took off his chiefly bracelet, the Lakano, and gave it to Luigi. Meanwhile, in the country of the Luba, to the east, a young hunter named Chibinda Ulunga set out with his friends towards the northwest in search of much-needed salt. The men were armed with bows and arrows. Loaded with hunting meat, they came to the banks of the Nkalani River, but they encountered a violent splashing with figures disappearing behind bushes. These were Luigi and her women who'd been surprised at their bathing. The bravest of the women stopped and called across the river, "Who are you and what do you want?" "I am a hunter, second in line to the Luba chief with my bold lads. We have meat. We need salt." It is told that when Luigi looked upon Chibinda, her liver went white, that it dissolved within her for love of him. She invited, I love that, my liver went white. She invited him across the river and into the fenced enclosure of the capital. And she drew this handsome hunter into her house to be her husband. She much had desired a baby by Chibinda. However, much time passed, and no child was born, for Luigi suffered from painful and heavy menstrual periods. Furthermore, she had a problem with the Locarno bracelet, the chieftainship given by her father. She could not keep such a sacred thing with her during those times of prolonged menstruation. So she gave the Locarno to Chibinda, the hunter, for safekeeping. Hunter that he was, he stole it and would not give it back. Now Luigi's ancestor spirits were angry with Chibinda. They visited the Lunda people in warning, and the diviner picked up their message. The people should start a new ritual for Luigi and all women suffering from menstrual pain, prolonged bleeding, and other women's troubles. The tradition tells how Luigi was cured by the ritual and had a baby to be heir to the chieftain. Now there's a little story. Now the ritual of Nkula, the fulfillment, and it's given in various forms and still persists in Zambia right now, a cure for women with reproductive troubles. As I experienced it way back in 1953, the ritual had 3 phases: the going in, called begging and pleading, a seclusion stage in a small hut with an enclosure or fence, then the coming out one called kutumbaka, meaning sowing a seed with a nuance of singing and dancing. This patient, whom I shall call Yana, had had 2 miscarriages and was afraid that the heavy bleeding in her cycles was giving no chance for a fetus to develop. If only I could have a baby, she kept saying, then I'd know for myself how that cure happens. I'd become an Nkula doctor myself and cure others. I have a feeling that's what I should do. You see. One night, Yana's body was heavy with bleeding and everlasting cramps. She had a dream. Her long-dead mother, Kaseli, who was childless until the Nkula spirit helped her, came to Yana in her misery. Kaseli rose up in front of her, as living as in reality, wearing a short shift and carrying a bow and arrow. On Kaseli's brow was set a bright red feather from the lorry bird, a feather of hunters. Kaseli was cinched round the waist with a belt and a pouch for medicines, flint and steel, and on her back she wore the spotted skin of a genet cat. Kaseli's mien was radiating energy, not given by herself, but some power of the ancestors. Kaseli was dancing, her head swaying like a person in wonder, freely swaying in a tranced rhythm, her cape flying around her. This was no war dance in the style of circumcision boys, but something for women that the spirit was teaching her. Remember me, said Kaseli, and be sure to seek help from the Makula tree. And she was no longer there. Once Yana told her dream to the people, they had no need of a diviner. They started the proper Nkula ritual of the Makula tree. And that first stage, they built a A-frame hut, to which was added a high grass fence as an enclosure, echoing in Luigi and Conde's enclosure. Here, Yana stayed while the doctors went off to seek herbal medicines. They came to a Makula tree, which is a red teak wood tree. And if you cut it, it has red sap, which immediately coagulates or sets. And this is therefore their blood. It's in a way, mystical way, in the way idea of the law of mystical participation. It is the same. It's identical. It has that quality. So, okay, people knelt down, hunkered down, poured out beer and said, Makula, first helper of the pregnancy of women, I beg you, please wake up. Give us babies. Please, I beg you. Now, the Ndembo tribe was, if anything, falling in population. It was doing very badly. So they took the pieces of the tree for medicine and went on and collected musengu also. It's a little tree with many flowers to draw many people to come and assist. Now, the Makula tree is a person, a spirit. Makula is also Kaseli, the mother spirit that visited Yana, for Kaseli in the spirit world had become for Yana both the Makula tree and the spirit of the Nkula ceremony. Back at the Nkula house, Yana was given drinking medicine, sprinkling lotions from this, And she was led to a fire outside and given the spirit itself, which was a shape of a red bead called ilembe, one red bead. And she wore it on the top of her brow. And then she danced. And she could dance this swaying dance. It goes, Mwana, mwana moye, mwana moye, mwana. That means only one child, only one child. They wanted 2 or 3. And then they danced all night, and afterwards she stayed in seclusion for many months. Then there's the final singing ceremony, right? The doctors then washed Jana with medicine. They dressed her in the spirit's garb, the short waistcloth, red feather, oil, red clay for her face, a stained menstrual towel, a genet skin cape, bow and arrow, a ritual axe, and white clay for blessing. The medicine people decorated the top of the enclosure wall, setting it around with a frieze of large upright leaves. I've seen this, which was the enclosure for the woman chief Mwanteambwa. Jana was Luigi and Conde in her hut of menstruation. This is this identification. The principal doctor prayed to Kasele for her. When the spirit comes to you to catch you at the moment of conception, may you be strong and have that child. It was night. They built a large fire and brought out the drums. A great crowd of women was there. I was there. And I looked up. A moon was starting to ride up from the eastern sky. Out came Jana from her enclosure, dancing, first in a crouch, and then rising upright in all her colourful garb, the feather, the spotted animal cape, her eyes aglow, her head swinging in a vast, lolling circle. All around to the multitude, everyone was dancing the same dance. And she was alive and yet relaxed, and her arms spreading out wide and open. Into that magical circle I soon joined, treading the rhythm around and round in the multitude. It seemed forever under the high-riding moon. The scene comes back to me easily from 50 years ago, with a tingling of all my limbs and a dissolving into the beloved black humanity round me. Swing, swing. No one could fail to roll in the delight of the body in the singing darkness. And so the night went on, and Jana got some washing from the medicine, and it came out again, and the hunter's dance swayed on in trance with its connection with the spirit. And in the morning, the doctors were going to make Jana her baby. And I went to watch. They found a small mukula tree. They danced around it to recognize its sacredness, pouring beer at its foot and planting a few beans and corn grains there. This is the spirit, they said to the tree. Dii Mukishi. It's just like, this is my body. An actuality, as Michael Hana and I call this. This is it. It's not just pretending. Okay? So they chopped down the tree to the sound of drumming and singing. They made the wood into a small baby, and they put it into a small calabash. This object was called Ilembe, spirit, like the little bead. The calabash was put into a basket, which in turn was wrapped up in a mat. Jana now came out in front and danced with the rolled-up mat on her head. Finally, the mat was pushed up into the rafters of Jana's house and kept there. She was told to sleep underneath it always. Later in Jana's life, she became a Nkula doctor herself and ended up with 4 children. I got the names of them. One of them was called Edith. I was very honored. Thank you. This ceremony has depths that can't altogether be plumbed. This was a childless woman dressed like a hunter. Isn't this an androgynous figure, probably burning with penis envy? But one asks, does she who so strongly begs for children want to kill them? Now there's all the difference in the world between a hunter and a warrior among the Ndembu. The warrior's dance is all threat and attack. The Ndembu have the same word for warrior as murderer. In this dance of Nkula, we see the dance of negative capability, awaiting and inviting, practiced by the partly possessed. Nkula involves a spiritual being which by the same negative capability can be drawn into communication and do good. Yana was that hunter, and her swaying dance paradoxically turned the hunter, this figure of the cheating male, remember, into its opposite, a protecting power through negative capability, a person listening for a connection with the spirit, with its fruitful promise. This is supremely female in its implications. Yana, like all women, needed every bit of the strength and courage said to belong to a man if she was to have her body used for pregnancy and childbirth. In her strange performance, she became what all women have to be, a powerful being. And what of the dance that I experienced of the mass of women? The dance of women healing women. The women swept this ritual into place through what had been commanded by the maternal ancestor spirits of Luigi and Conde before her misfortune. Treachery had overcome Luigi then, and childlessness, harsh and cheating treatment has often been our own lot too. In Africa, with the spirit's help, it was all women gathered there under the moon, and we were all extraordinarily happy, mesmerized by each other's presence, there for the sake of a sister, experiencing a communitas beyond communitas, fellowship. The Apache, now we've got another story. The Apache women and their initiate, we come right over the Atlantic to Arizona, and the woman who becomes a healer for 4 days, and that's the Native American people, the Mescalero Apache in New Mexico, not Arizona, pardon me, who perform their customs at this present time. This next July 4th they'll do it. The material comes from the anthropologist Claire Farrer. It's significant that the tribe was once in danger of disappearing altogether. When in 1873 their girls' initiation ceremony and all gatherings were banned by the US government, the birth rate of the tribe dropped considerably. When in 1912 permission was given for the revival of the ceremony, the birth rate rose and the people prospered. The core of the ritual consists of the dance of the girls dressed in traditional deerskin and the work of their godmothers. They have a word for that, who instruct them. According to Apache men, women have all the power. I like that. During the magnificent 4-day ceremonial centered on the tipi, the holy lodge of initiation, the girls spiritually become the manifestation of the earth divinity, the co-creator of all things along with the sun. This co-creator is named White Painted Woman, and she's none other than the spirit of the movement from youth to old age, from dawn in the east to sunset in the west, and back to the dawn again eternally. In the heart of the big ceremony, the girls becomes healers, first receiving a ritual pollen blessing and then giving the same blessing to all. This blessing becomes the power to heal illness. In the video made in the year 2001 by Thomas and Eleanor Nevins of the University of Virginia, you can see long lines of people taking turns to receive the healing touch and the blessing of the girl. Attention is focused on the girls and the ministrations of the godmothers to them. Goodness washes over the girls who kneel, while a line forms to the southeast of them. The girls' mothers stand behind, holding baskets of food. Anyone who wishes to be blessed may go through the line. Those who have specific complaints linger to rub some of the pollen on the afflicted parts of their bodies, or they may whisper a request for a blessing to an afflicted or weak area. Anyone who is sick or troubled will go through the line, as will those who seek to remain well and partake of the blessing of white-painted woman as mediated through the girls. Immediately after the healings, the reverse healing is scene, the moulding of the girls. Blankets are placed before each girl to the east, and suddenly she plunges down on them on her stomach. The godmother now is healer. She rushes forward and proceeds to press the girl's physical form into the person that she will become. You can see this on the video. The hands of the godmother mold and press every part of her body, giving the sense of a great artist or shaper. Watching this video, I feel that the old woman is the creator of the girl. The girl is putty and is being made into what she is. The older women in their time have been white painted women themselves, and they are her creator now. The spirituality of the girls is confirmed by the next ceremony, which is the running. At first, the girl is painted white on her face, arms, and legs. She is white painted woman. A basket containing grass, feathers, tobacco, and pollen is taken out to the east of the Holy Lodge and set on the ground at the far edge of the camp. This distance is one's lifespan. Everyone sings, and the girls run out of the tipi towards the basket, all around it and back again. They do this 4 times, and the basket is set a bit closer to the Holy Lodge each time. The 4 runs are the girls' stages of life: infancy, childhood, adulthood, and old age, ending at the Holy Lodge. As each girl finishes her race, she receives many presents. Now, about all this, we tend to react to these rituals with certain regret that we lack any good on-the-ground community to draw together the communitas, or any pan-tribal occasion of mystical participation. We have these little separate ones, okay? However, and we know, practitioners in America have the power of healing. And they know the gratitude returned by someone who's been psychologically, physically, spiritually helped to cope with this world. This world, this place where one is told that the very world is running down, etc., except there is a creative principle in us too. Never forget that. Women healing women does happen, and it's not limited to any one religion. In my cases, there's been perhaps a courageous or very honored woman in the past. In Jana's case, Luigi, someone who was naturally good and treated her father well, and who in her own troubles had listened with her people to the ancestor spirit's instructions. And in the case of white painted woman, the divine figure of passing from youth into old age and back again, like the passage of the sun back into morning. Now there's another case. I never timed myself. Where's Susan?
We've got about 10 minutes.
10 minutes. All right. Thank you. In Knock, in Ireland, on the west of Ireland, in 1879, there appeared a blaze of light in the moment of Ireland's greatest poverty. And that became a source of personal healing for many. This was a woman that appeared in that blaze of light. This history is related by Coyne and Walsh and the pilgrimage explored by myself. It begins in 1879, the middle of the second greatest potato famine. And in the summer, rain had been falling steadily, the whole country sodden and afflicted with potato blight. I have to make this short, but you'll get it. It was 8 p.m. on that Thursday evening, August 21st, when it occurred. It was in the middle of relentless rain. 15 people, mainly women, witnessed it as they stood on a muddy lane behind the church. Women were passing to and fro along that lane at first, with their black shawls chattering in Gaelic. One of them stopped. "What's that?" They saw a great vast light radiating out of the gable of the end of the church, and in it glowed a brilliant array of holy personages. They gaped. "What would they be doing out there in the rain?" said the woman. They looked at each other, smiling. "Did the priest order new statues?" said another. "And why would he be putting them there at the back?" No one knew. In the center of the light was the Blessed Mother, tall, with a glimmer of a crown on her head, not like Queen Victoria. Her crown. Aha. Yes. good old Mary. And her hands were spread out towards the people. She could feel they could feel the healing power between those hands. And other saints. The woman Mary Byrne, in her low voice, said, "'Tis the Mother of God herself." What does it mean, the Mother of God? That's the Creator of the Creator. Interesting. It's Our Lady, come to us in light, our Blessed Mother. 3 children down the lane stood transfixed. They pointed and started to climb over the stone wall. "Lift me up," said the smallest boy to Patrick, who was bigger. "I want to see the grand babies." And this is in the text. "Wait a minute now," said old Mrs. Trench. She waved them down. "I'm coming with you." And she lifted up her skirt and clambered over the wall. The other side, it was soaking wet with the rain, and she got up to the gable in the middle of the dazzle, and she had the children all around. She knew she was as near to heaven as she'd get in this life. And she said, 100,000 thanks, Cade Mila Fulci. Thanks to the good God and to you, our glorious Lady, for giving us this manifestation. That's in all the texts. And they watched it for a couple of hours and then went home because they were soaking wet. Now, the pilgrimage started. And the very next day, and I've seen the lists of the miracles, and they're all ignored now by the Catholic Church, but they happened. It's not the fashion to believe in miracles. I can't understand half of this. Now let's put it like this. A woman's spirit flamed into existence in response to the people's love and the pitiful hopelessness of their lot. It's almost unbelievable. The appearance of the mother was immediately recognized as her personal act of love. This stunning occasion of a vision jumps all our experience of power and personal healing. Down through history, these great moments have been recorded. They're recorded in the writings of the great religions, all the great. Similar occasions in the appearance of Kuan Yin or Kuan On, the beloved Buddhist bodhisattva or saint, and the story of Rachel in Judaism, and Nkubulwana among the Zulus, and there's many others, you can tell me them. Then the modern pilgrimage. Time went by. The pilgrimage figures rose to 1.5 million in 1996 when I went on pilgrimage with my daughter Rini. You know my daughter Rini. We went on pilgrimage in the bus from Skibbereen in the south with a whole load of pilgrims. The majority were women. They were saying, and we were saying, the rosary, all 5 decades of 10 prayers each. And then we said it again, and then we said it again. And this is now called a mantra, a mantra. You see, what you're doing is putting yourself in the mode of spirituality by this mantra. And they talked and joked at first a bit, and as soon as we got near the actual pilgrimage place in County Mayo, they began to get quiet. It was like the quiet of that vision. And and I said, "Where are we?" And she said, "We don't know. We just go wherever they take us. We don't know where we are." There was a sort of vague mystical air that envelops these pilgrims. When we arrived at the basilica there, I saw the statue of the Lady carried in. The hands of the statue were making the same gesture that one makes in order to feel the energy between one's palms. Her hands are in the gesture of healing, giving, they said. The sick were anointed, including me, and I had a sense of the anointing oil is warm, very warm. This warmth is always a sign. And it spread into my arms and all over my body. Nice, good, military. And recently a sick woman had been cured with a bit of plaster from the old gable. Another woman came with a complaint, and when she got home, there was no complaint. Another 2 cases. Case of cancer. This woman had a checkup after there was no sign of the disease. Case of Marion Carroll 7 years previously. She was cured of multiple sclerosis. And there's always this silence. I go to knock, they said, in one frame of mind, I come out different. There's something that I have, a knowledge. And they went to knock over some trouble, and then they felt all right about it. And I saw that great procession, and I entered it all around the walkways outside. I joined them with my own rosary and walked contentedly. and walked and spoke the prayer and spoke the prayer. It was just one prayer being said. No one person seemed to be saying it. Instead, the whole body of people, and I wished it would go on forever. What is the time after all? 2 minutes. Okay. I wish it could go on forever. So why are so many people going to these things? Of course, you could say it's all business, worked up by business and so on. And there are huge pilgrimages going on in the world. In the biggest, at the Kumbh Mela in India, 75 million people went that recent year. That's unthinkable. We can't think of it as a pilgrimage number. And you know what I think is going on? There's something that wants this, wants the integration of this collective, wants even the rosary procession in which I walked. It wants the knitting of the integument, the possible union between people, wants that procession murmuring as one person. And they want us to come and feel it again. It's like the healing of a wound, a natural creation of connectedness, which one knows and palpably feels. And it is what human beings, plural, were made for with regard to one another. There's that flower plant which brings a number of people. Then in a group of people comprising a circle of trust, when anything can be said and it will be loved, when there's a permeability between people which is perfect, and flow occurs, and there exists something like the attraction of particles to one another found in nature, a kind of level of consciousness of immense value, far wider than the individual, operating of its own volition in the business of connections between people, of which the people are often aware and express in the ways we call religion. And we got this in Knock. Victor Turner talked about communitas, love, which is a form of the social, not often described in anthropology. Half a minute? Okay. As Turner describes it, it's different from the social implied with, keeping on the right side of the road and all the rest of it. You've got to be socialized and so on. This is to do with liminal situations, time of change and creativity, sacred events, not usually found in government and opinion. It's very often expressed in the propensity of women to help each other survive. It's in joining of voices. A band, when it gets in the groove, have this communitas. So when the scene suddenly opens and you know that you're in communitas with people. And it's not just a single soul uniting with God. And this is something very, very vital. And women, when in dealing with modern urban problems, have great spiritual resources as well as the willingness to help people on their feet. Now, this and all these therapeutic touches like this too. I don't believe that what is spiritual in the healing of women should ever be left out of the picture, as it often is. So that spiritual is something that's there. Here I've tried to put into words how it does indeed enter the picture. And thank you.
A traditional role of an elder in a community is to help younger members of the community see the broader meaning of the world that they live in and of the community that they live in. And I think that Edie Turner has really done that this evening and helped us in Women Healing Women understand in a much broader context the meaning of the projects that we've been doing and of the dialogue that we've been engaged with. And as I was listening to Edie, I just had an insight that to me was maybe, will sound trivial when I share it, but I think that it was really something very profound. When I first began to tell people that I had taken on the job of directing the Religion, Health, and Healing Initiative, the reaction often was, Oh, isn't there already something like that at Harvard? There's the Mind-Body Institute. And it took me a long time, I think perhaps until Edie spoke tonight, to really be able to put my finger on what the difference is. And I think that that's helped me also understand why, despite there being certain contentious issues in our Women Healing Women group, there really was a core paradigm that we all shared. And I think that that paradigm is one that completely transcends the mind-body paradigm. And it's a paradigm that I think has three completely interrelated elements. The first one is the body. And while some of the women in our group are clergy people and don't do any kinds of direct hands-on physical healing, they all acknowledge the nobility and the reality and the importance and the dignity of the body. I think that the second element that our group has a consensus about is spirit, however it's defined, but a sense that there is something beyond the body, not in any way negating the importance of the body, but acknowledging something that is more than the physiological and chemical reactions that we can track in a laboratory. But I think that the third element, and this is what's really lost in the mind-body conversation, and this is what Edie really helped us put a finger on tonight, is the element of relationship and community. And I think that all of the women in our group understand that healing always takes place in relationship. The women in our group have approached the technical aspect of that relationship in a variety of ways. But I want to suggest that there are two key ways which were discussed by Edie over and over in the examples that she shared with us. The first of these ways is through the hands. And Edie indeed has written a book called The Hands Feel It. And tonight we're going to hear short presentations by a number of healers in our group. One of them, it was the last one who will present, Patricia Warren, teaches the touch of compassion. But another healer in our group, Noor Qasimali, is a physician, and she's going to talk very shortly about her research on rituals around the figure of Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad. And I think that the figure of Fatima is most known around the world because of the hand of Fatima, that five-fingered hand that you see all over the Middle East and really all around the world at this point. I think that the second tool of this kind of healing through relationship and through community is through the voice. And I loved your description of the women chanting the rosary over and over and over and over again on this train ride. Our first presenter tonight is Maureen Chase, and she uses voice in the context of community as a tool of healing. Maureen?
Excuse me. Sound, frequency, vibration, these can all help facilitate the healing process. Some sounds can actually affect the cells in the body, the tissues, the molecules, the DNA. If I understand Einstein correctly, I think he proved that we exist in a universe that consists entirely of energy. Everything vibrates. Our organs, our bones, The world sings, the universe vibrates. It's all a vibration, it's a frequency of sound. One of the greatest instruments of healing, one that's natural, cost-effective, doesn't require batteries, no electrical outlet, is the human voice. My project was called the Medicine Voice Project. Why the medicine voice? Because our voices can be our medicine. I worked with women with breast cancer at the Virginia Thurston Healing Garden in Harvard, Mass., a community of support for women with breast cancer, which was suggested by a colleague in our group. Mary, thank you. 6 of us met for 8 weekly sessions, and at the request of the participants, we're meeting monthly for the next 4 months. Women with breast cancer are treated in the Western medical model with radiation, chemotherapy, surgery, and then they're released into the world. And where do they go? Where do they go to support themselves, to transition into a new life? Common emotional reactions to a cancer diagnosis are anxiety, fear, anger, among many other things, and a feeling that your body let you down. The central practice of my Medicine Voice Project is called spirit singing, or spirit song. And spirit song is a practice that requires no special skills, no talents, no singing experience required. It's a unique approach to healing through the ancient sound healing practice of toning, which can be simply the vowels, traditionally of A, I, O, U. Rudolf Steiner said that these vowel sounds are the sounds of the soul and connect the soul with the body. One of the women in my group used toning while she went to her radiation treatments, and she said that it made her feel so much better. One of the women in my group also went to Disneyland with her 4 children, and she said, I'm going to tone everywhere. I'm just going to tone. I said, good, you go make noise. And she was going on the roller coaster, and she said, and I was toning. You know, it wasn't until I was writing this down today that I realized I think we would all be toning on the roller coaster. So next time you go on a roller coaster, try it out. For many of us, our voices were shut down early on, with varying messages ultimately telling us to keep quiet. Some people simply need permission to sing. And sometimes that is the only thing they need to get started. A spirit song circle is sacred, a gathering specifically designed with the intention of allowing people to explore the power and diversity of their own unique voice. This circle provided the benefits of consistent spiritual group support, as well as a place to meditate, pray, and sing together. We would gather in a sacred circle, smudge in the Native American tradition to clear the aura, create an altar in the middle in which everyone lit a candle each week, and the altar stayed there to keep the energy going. I would play the crystal ball. We would pray and invoke healing energies and safety, and we would have a check-in as to how they were doing through the week. We would present dreams that we had. And then we would have a group song while I drummed softly, sometimes group meditation, grounding exercise, which is very important because voice, like everything, is electrical current, and you have to get used to that. Then the circle opens for anyone to spirit sing. The very first group was beyond my expectations. Usually I find that people hold themselves back. They're afraid to get up and, oh my God, I have to sing. These women were amazing. They showed such bravery and courage. They wanted to get in the middle of that circle and sing. And I really had to applaud them because that's usually not the case. I would guess I should just give you a very brief example of what spirit singing is, and it's just going to be very brief. Whoa. Hey ya new ya la woman, hey yo I feel that by doing this practice in a group, it's very much like we are all healing each other, because some of the ailments that we have are a matter of we're not making that frequency that is for health for us. And somebody else will sing, perhaps, that frequency that we need. And it's very much a healing ritual. And I believe that offering opportunities to access one's own abilities to move one's own energy is self-empowering. The participants reported that they experienced a tremendous release of fear, and all felt much more peaceful after the project. I would love to see this practice move into medical facilities and be considered a part of CAM, complementary and alternative medicine. Since sound can potentially rearrange molecular structure, the possible healing effects are limitless. Thank you, and I'll hold.
I appreciate Maureen's drawing our attention to healing, in one sense, for women as being an act of finding voices that were often silenced at other stages in our life or in other corners of the world around us. Noor Qasim will present her project now, Health, Healing Rituals, and the Role of Fatima, and one of the themes of her work is uncovering women's rituals and women's ritual voice.
Thank you, Susan. Maureen is a tough act to follow. If I were to sing, you would all leave. That we can guarantee. Well, as you can know, I'm also very technologically challenged. Okay. Let me begin with an anecdote. One of the women that I interviewed said, "My grandson was very ill. He was being treated at Children's Hospital. The doctors who were involved in his care did not know what was wrong. He was very sick and was going to die. I prayed every waking moment for God to spare him. I prayed to Bibi Fatima, daughter of Prophet Muhammad, and recited special prayers. I told her I would perform the rote ritual if she would intervene and save my grandson. Bibi Fatima is a mother. She understands these issues and helps women through their times of difficulties. I started the 40-day period of special prayers, and just a few days later, the doctors determined what was wrong with my grandson. I knew in my heart he would be okay because of my prayers." In the past 2 decades, there has been a significant transformation in the practice of medicine. As a clinician, I now routinely ask my patients if they are taking any supplements, such as glucosamine for their joint pain or black cohosh for their hot flashes. I refer my patients with breast cancer for acupuncture, for chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting. In short, complementary medicine has been mainstreamed into our medical practice, even at Harvard. The Beth Israel now has acupuncturists on staff, and the University Health Services has Reiki practitioners. We have, indeed, come a long way from the traditional, narrow, allopathic medicine worldview. But what about the role of spirituality, religious beliefs, and rituals, and their effects on healing? Over the past 2 decades, there has been considerable interest in investigating the impact of spirituality and religious beliefs on patients' health. My goal was to document this faith factor in the health and well-being of Muslim women residing in Boston. I specifically chose healing rituals that were associated with Bibi Fatima because they have not been studied in detail. I interviewed both Shia and Sunni women between the ages of 40 to 70. I will limit my discussion today to 3 groups of women: the 2 Shia sects, the Twelvers and the Ismaili, and 1 Sunni group, the Somali. I will discuss 4 rituals that are specifically associated with Bibi Fatima. These are Oshe Nazari among the Twelver women from Iran, Bibi Fatima's Rot and Bibi Fatima's Tali, which are common to both Twelver and Ismaili women from the Indian subcontinent, and Sitat Binti Rasul, which is held by the Somali women. Among the Shia women, ritual purity, tahara, that is, not menstruating, not being postpartum, and in some instances, abstinence from sexual intercourse is obligatory. For the Somali women, ritual purity is not a requirement, as one of the primary reasons for performing the sitat is to invoke Bibi Fatima's assistance to facilitate labor and delivery. Sitat is usually held for a pregnant woman during the late 3rd trimester. Childbirth is difficult, even in the best of environments. Imagine the challenges of childbirth in the harsh Somali environment, coupled with the traditional practice of female circumcision. It is no coincidence that the sitat is so closely connected with labor and delivery. These rituals are generally held in private homes and not at mosques. This is true for both in the women's countries of origin and here in Boston. This is an important distinction, as within the normative practice of Islam, women generally do not feel welcome to participate in congregational prayers in many of the sects of Islam. These rituals, therefore, are all female gatherings and by invitation only. The males in the household are generally not around and at times may not be even aware of these rituals. I would now like to invite the women in the audience to come with me to a road ceremony. Sorry, guys. It is early morning. Our children and husbands have left for work and school, and since we are going to a road ceremony this morning, we will skip breakfast and fast. Let's take a quick shower, wash our hair, put on some clean clothes, and we're ready to go. We arrive at a woman's home, take off our shoes, sit in a circle on the floor, which is covered with clean sheets, and recite our prayers silently. When most of the women have arrived, a plate of rot is placed on a small stool in the middle and covered with a green cloth. Then one of the older women starts the prayers, which are recited aloud. First, we pray to Allah and the Prophet. Then we appeal for Bibi Fatima's support. We listen to a story of how Bibi Fatima comes to help a woman who is having difficulties. The story done, the green cloth is lifted from the rot plate, and sometimes the women say that they see an imprint of Bibi Fatima's hand on it. It is at this time that a woman may choose to make a pledge if she has any problems. After the formal prayers, the women partake of a small amount of rot, which is distributed much like communion at a church. Then they break their fast with some hot tea and other foods. Some of the other rituals, such as sitat or tali, also involve specific foods, sometimes also special clothes and perfume. My goal was to document the different types of rituals associated with Bibi Fatima. I did not expect the women to perform these rituals in the U.S. I was surprised when a number of women told me that they do perform these rituals here, although not as frequently as in their countries of origin. When I asked why, time and financial constraints were the common reasons. But availability of good medical care was also cited as a reason. One Somali woman told me that it was no longer necessary to use traditional methods for treating sinusitis in children, as the antibiotics worked quite well. None of the women felt participating in these rituals was contrary to the use of Western medicine. As one of my interviewees said, Nin bukha bukhol kof ba utalia. A sick person can take the advice of 100 persons, meaning there is no contradiction in combining these healing ritual methods with Western medicine. But these women's rituals are being threatened. When I first started recruiting women for my project, some women accused me of promoting practices that were considered bid'ah, or innovation, and refused to be interviewed. We cannot ignore the recent influence of Muslim fundamentalists. Many women feel pressured to conform to the normative interpretation of Islam. It will be a sad day when Muslim women cannot participate in their own rituals, which are very empowering, but are coerced into the normative, somewhat officially male-centered, misogynistic practice of Islam. I thank you for listening.
Continuing with our informal theme of voice, we heard from Noor about efforts on the part of the religious establishment to really try to, if not totally eradicate, certainly play down traditional women's rituals. And something that Noor and I discussed is that no anthropologists have written about these rituals around Fatima. I mean, there's something almost ironic in a physician in Boston being the first person to document these Fatima-centered rituals. We're going to move now to the presentation by Mary Maxwell and Gina Ogden, The Best Is Yet to Come, Women Talking About Sex and Menopause. If we're really looking for an area that has not been able to be talked about in our society, I think we can't do much better than sexuality and menopause.
Gina and I have collaborated to produce a PowerPoint presentation for menopausal women with the hope of providing a forum for women to discuss their concerns about aging and sexuality. I became interested in menopause issues for two reasons. The first evolved from the results of the Women's Health Initiative study that was published in 2002, which reported an increase in breast cancer, strokes, and heart disease in women who are taking hormone replacement therapy, that is estrogen and progesterone together. At work, my patients were inquiring about alternative therapies to deal with some of the perplexing side effects associated with menopause, like hot flashes and lack of sexual desire. Secondly, I was personally struggling with hot flashes and sleep deprivation, so I was delving into the research to come up with some non-hormonal therapies for myself. Gina and I had the privilege to meet each other here at Women Healing Women. We came from very different healing backgrounds, mine as a nurse practitioner in women's health, and Gina as a sex therapist and spiritual healer. Yet our interests definitely overlapped. Over the past year, we shared our ideas together to devise a way that menopausal women could come together for discussions similar to a new mom support group. After several revisions, we finally decided to address the questions that women ask most frequently at my practice and offer discussion topics that range from the latest medical information to very practical and human suggestions about relationships. Some of the questions we address are, how can I feel sexual if I cannot get a good night's sleep? What should I do if intercourse becomes painful or impossible? How did I lose my desire for sex, and can I get it back? How can I be sexual if I no longer have a partner? We intend to take this presentation to women's centers and to staff meetings of health providers, so let us know if you're interested. Our grant has been expanded to give us the opportunity to collaborate with our bodies ourselves to create a CD-ROM. This can be used for group discussion or for women to play in private if that is a more comfortable way for them to take in this information on sexuality and menopause. And now Gina.
I get to show the pictures. I'm Gina Ogden. The reason that we decided to do a PowerPoint presentation was not only so that I could deal with my own phobia of technology, but that we thought being able to use a visual medium was a way to fly under the radar of all of the prescriptions that women in this culture have, particularly older women really dealing with sexual issues. So one of the ways, and Susan was brilliant in suggesting this, that we decided we would begin would be by simply being able to show the diversity, some of the diversity of the women we were talking about without having to talk about it. So here we have some of the kinds of women that we're talking about. And here we have this wonderful photograph of Dina Metzger, who is dealing with one of the problems of getting older and perhaps being menopausal. She deals with breast cancer by, in her words, on the book of my body, I have permanently inscribed a tree. She has simply taken something that the culture says is a terrible, bad, awful thing, and she's made a poem about it and written a book about it. We also are able to show women in different kinds of relationships. So here we have women in relationship. And we're able to deal one of the delights of working with a partner. One of the delights of working with Mary is she seems to have a whole book of cartoons. So that we could deal with some of the very real stuff that is difficult for us in menopause, and I certainly include myself, and do it with a light touch, with some humor, without having to incessantly crack jokes, for instance. But mostly what we are looking at in this presentation is the fact that for many women in this culture, sexuality and menopause is a very silent passage, that it's not okay for us to talk about. Edie was talking about community. It's totally not okay for us to come together in community and talk about this passage. So we certainly encourage women to educate themselves, read books, watch videos, and we can show some of our favorite books. This is from the Boston Women's Health Book Collective. This is Chris Northrup's incredibly wonderful book. This is written by some colleagues of mine, very detailed description of sexuality at all ages, including for older women. We can talk and show. We can show as well as tell. What one of the things you can do if intercourse becomes difficult or impossible. These are some of the lubricants you can use. And here's a lubricant you shouldn't use, because not only does it stop your natural secretions, but it will disintegrate condoms. So it opens up a discussion about safe sex where that might be appropriate for women. We can talk about estrogen and all of the hoo-ha that's going on around should I, shouldn't I, if I do, how should I take it, how much, where. And this enables us to show, what about Viagra, the V word, that's now they're testing it on women. Viagra is a multi-billion-dollar industry, which is turning both women and, as Susan says, men into making us dysfunctional in order to sell products. We can also talk about something beyond intercourse and talk about us as women, talk about us as whole women, and even talk about and show erotic aids. Here are some of them. You can see us later if you want to see more. Mostly. There's a reception afterwards. We're going to show it. We have an endless loop of the whole show. Mostly we are talking about breaking silence. And one of the ways that we introduce this is through a survey that I did on sexuality and spirituality, in which there were almost 4,000 respondents, 1,500 letters. Women talked about how to bring body and soul together. And so we show some of the quotes and put the quotes out so that women in the audience can talk, can use these as rehearsal. And here's a 77-year-old woman who writes about the closeness of sharing body and soul with her partner. Basically, we bring it into the voices of the women in community, women sharing, and talking about defining their own experiences instead of being defined by their doctors, by the pharmaceutical companies, etc. So we are ready to take this show on the road. We would love to come to your community and talk about it. See us afterwards. Thank you very much.
Another Women Healing Women participant also looked at issues around menopause and around silence. But if the theme of Mary and Gina's project was breaking the silence, I think that for Edith Silvas Villalobos, the theme is really breaking the double silence. She did work among Mexican and Mexican-American women who live very bicultural existences along the South Texas-Mexican border. Many of these women cannot speak fluently in English and so are really silenced in terms of their lives in the North American side of the border. Their daughters have moved on into really different kinds of lives and no longer hear their own mother's stories maybe in the way that they would have a generation earlier. So Edith is going to share some of her work with us now.
No, señora, you're not pregnant.
Of course not.
Doña Carmen, don't you think I know a thing or two about this?
I haven't had a period in 4 months.
Doña Carmen, that's not unusual for a woman your age. I think it's about time you and I had a little conversation about menopause. O sea, el cambio de vida.
Mom, the doctor said no sugar. Why?
We laugh at this clip from the movie Real Women Have Curves, but there are some women who think they might be pregnant when in fact they are going through menopause. It was during a Women Healing Women meeting that I first started thinking about this subject. As I tried to recall what my mother had shared with me on this topic, I realized she hadn't. This surprised me since we normally talk about everything. So that evening I called her and asked about her menopausal experience. And then I talked to my friends about what their mothers had shared with them. After some grunts and, Edie, I discovered that none of them knew anything either. And so, postmenopausal oral stories of Mexican and Mexican-American women was born. For this qualitative study, I conducted 30 face-to-face open-ended interviews in English and Spanish based upon the participants' preference. The women ranged in age from 52 to 90. They were recruited from 3 organizations: Presa Community Center, the Center for Women in Church and Society at Our Lady of the Lake University, and University Park Baptist Church. All are located in predominantly Mexican neighborhoods in San Antonio, Texas. Before beginning the interviewing process, I was worried that these women would refuse to speak to me about such a personal subject, but the opposite occurred. Most voiced how pleased they were to talk about a subject that has traditionally been kept silent. These women kept me honest and on time. They faithfully kept their appointments unless a family emergency arose, and they sought me out when I was at one of the 2 centers. I learned a lot from them. The first being that there are a wide range of responses when talking about menopause, or el cambio de vida, the change of life, as it is referred to in our community. For example, while one woman confidently said she began menopause at age 11, another gave me a medical definition for menopause. But it wasn't just the definitions and perceptions that varied. The treatments did as well. I was surprised by the low number of women who said they had not gone to a botanica, which is an herbal medicine shop. And right now, this is actually one of the murals that's on a botanica in San Antonio that is very well attended by other women in the neighborhood. And I'm just going to flip through this before I continue. But this is a mosaic that's a couple of stories high of the Virgen de Guadalupe, who most of my women referenced. And we'll go on with the presentation. But most of them had not gone to curanderas, which are healers, or botanicas for treatment. Even more surprising to me was the number of women who had taken, or who had relatives who had taken, a tonic that was made in the late 1900s, known as Lydia Pinkham. They call it Lady Pinkham in San Antonio, and that's how they even refer to it in the botanicas. It comes to find out that they sell it at botanicas at one of this pharmacy, Davila Pharmacy, which is on the west side of San Antonio, a very heavily populated Mexican neighborhood in San Antonio. And upon request at San Antonio's large chain grocery store, which is H-E-B, they don't stock that there, but I did call and ask, and if you call and ask, they'll bring it to you the next day. They'll have it there for you the next day. And this is another well-known botanica in San Antonio. It's called Papa Jim's. And these are all located in the neighborhoods. This is me and my mom. And this is the botanica that has the mural. I don't know if you can tell or not, that was up earlier. And this is my grandmother. And this is one of the other murals that exist. And if you look closely, and you can see this at the altar at the reception area, but they talk about which herbs are for what healing. So you can see that they mention rosemary, for instance. But the most important thing that occurred during my interviews wasn't so much that I learned about menopause. It was that I learned about what it is to be a woman, a Mexican woman at that. In 1 hour's time, they shared from deep within. Some visited places they had almost forgotten existed. And their wisdom poured out. In their stories, in their laughter, and in their tears. There was an exchange of power and healing. This is when I discovered that my project wasn't about menopause, but about compassionate listening. One interview comes to mind as one woman shared about her years of abuse and isolation. I wondered if I had unknowingly opened a wound that would be left exposed and raw after our interview. It was the only time I offered to turn off my recorder. I looked at her and said, "You don't have to tell me this." She said, "I do." So I listened, and I learned. It has been said that if you educate a boy, you educate a man. But if you educate a girl, you educate a family. I hope through this work that we have become the education of families.
Jacqueline Smith Crooks also focused her healing attention on cross-generational dialogue, and she's going to be presenting her project, Remembering African American Women Healing Through Sharing.
Nothing has happened now that hadn't happened before. Those were the words of one of the women I interviewed in Macon, Georgia, 78 years old, lived down the street from me, and when we were growing up, we thought Ms. Lois was just sort of so. However, after an evening in my mother's living room with several women from my childhood, 64 and older, I learned that none of the women were just so. This project, Remembering, and I hyphenated the remembering because it means reconnecting. Remembering African American women healing through sharing. This is an oral history project that brought together elder and younger African American women to talk about healing resources that they have or continue to have, that they use to maintain and sustain themselves mentally, physically, socially, and spiritually. In biblical language, the writer says, "Tell ye your children of it, and let your children tell their children, and their children another generation." This, unfortunately, seems to be going unheeded in many African American countries throughout this, in many African American communities throughout this country. Thus, the purpose of this project. These individuals came together as individuals and as members of a group to tell the stories. They told stories that were designed naturally to reconnect, to fill those empty or missing places within and without. This project brought together elder and younger women to reconnect in conversations, to help reclaim the power of resources that promote and support healing of individuals and of communities. Listening to and telling stories offers shared gifts. It's a life-changing experience that becomes a tie that binds. Richard Morgan says that remembering one's story can lead to a life of wholeness. It restores parts of ourselves, whether we're young or old, that we have forgotten, that we have suppressed, or that we have denied. This remembering gives meaning to the present and hope for tomorrow. Stories heal us as we remember the diverse fragments and witness the piecing together of the quilt. One of the women in the project, as she shared her story, spoke very emphatically, and she responded to much of the conversation about healing in a very spiritual way. But what touched me most deeply was the statement that she made, that black women are strong women. And I know, she said, because I am one. The meetings that we held were designed to provide a model that can be replicated in other faith communities, and that is my intention, to take this storytelling, this story sharing into other places so that we can make sure that we tell our children, and our children tell their children, and their children tell theirs. This project came about, one, because I recognize the impact of these times, the way in which we are no longer gaining a sense of wholeness. I know that yesterday always seems to have been more perfect than today. But as we look out on the landscape of communities, in urban places, in rural places around America, we find the disconnect, not only between elders and youngers, but even among the elders. One of the women in Macon, Georgia, started a daycare center over 30-some years ago. And she found out from her neighbor in the conversation that the neighbor's sister had come in from California to observe this daycare center, and she went back to California to start up her own. And the response of the daycare owner in Macon was, "I didn't know that. And you've made my life just a little bit better." The other reason this project came into existence was that I have a belief that one small action can help to reclaim at least a portion of the connectedness that once existed. And it reaffirms a sense of self in individuals, and it reaffirms the self of communities. The belief and determination of the women at the Center for the Study of World Religions was by no chance minimal to this project completion. It was because the Susans and the staff brought together the women and fed us well and helped pull from us those pieces, those broken pieces that we had not tapped into. And by so doing, we're able to reach further and to do more. The women in these groups range from the ages of 13 to 99. The 99-year-old was going to join us tonight, but was unable to when I talked with her earlier today. She turned 100 last Sunday. We brought people together in Macon. We brought people together in the greater Boston area, and in each case it was to have been for one session. The group in Boston decided that it would not be for one session, and we will be continuing. We plan to pull together a media product which will be a book, and we also plan to continue to go around to faith-based communities and community-based organizations, engaging more people in further conversations that will remember and reconnect.
Patricia Warren's project in many ways encapsulates the messages that we've been hearing throughout this evening. So I'd like to ask Patricia to please come and talk about her project, Empowering the Caregiver, the Touch of Compassion.
The inspiration for this project came to me during my recovery from knee replacement surgery. It was then I realized my desire to work with certified nurses' aides and home health aides, to share with them the training that I had previously provided for doctors and nurses in the art of compassionate touch. Why did I choose this group of healthcare providers? These were the people who spent the most personal time with me and had the most hands-on contact. They played an important part in my recovery, assisting me in the process of my healing. Susie Rosenwasser was my assistant, and she and I worked with 39 different people in a variety of healthcare facilities over a period of 4 months. This culturally diverse group of participants ranged in age and training. Some had taken 100 hours of technical school training, and several had taken courses through the Red Cross, but others were grandfathered in based on their many years of work experience. Let me share what a typical session was like. We set up chairs in a circle. Each person introduced themselves to us, telling us a bit about their job description. We were interested to know if they had received any previous training about the body's natural energy centers, meditation, or had received any hands-on work, therapeutic touch, massage, Reiki. In all of the participants, only 2 people had any knowledge of this subject. We then introduced ourselves to them, and Susie spoke about why we were there and the goal of the project. I emphasized the importance of their job as caregivers, letting them know that at one time in my life, I was a home health aide. Realizing that most in-service instruction is lecture, handout, or conversation, Susie and I wondered, how could we accomplish our goal of helping the health aides recognize the spiritual potential of the work that they do day in and day out? We began most sessions with a paired-off interaction where they learned about the energy field. They experienced the concept of physical and energetical boundaries and the importance of energy centers in the body. This was a fun experience that helped each person feel confident in their findings, experiencing how one person can affect another person without physical touch. For their second activity, partners sat across from each other. They asked for and received permission to touch one another. We discussed appropriate touch, the quality of touch, presence, really being there for someone, meditation, and how healing touch is instinctive. One group was the giver and one the receiver. Receivers were taught how to be open to receive, and givers went through a short and simple meditation exercise. Then they were asked to touch their partner in different ways. For example, how would you touch a person who was in pain? How would you console them or support them non-verbally? Or, how would you touch a person to show respect? This interaction took about 20 minutes. In meditation, with eyes closed, they were asked to reflect on what it was like to give and what it was like to receive. They had time to share their feelings, experiences, and comments. Many were very surprised at the way they felt after receiving compassionate touch. How simple, yet how profound. Most felt cared for, relaxed, comforted. They felt respect and love. For all of the participants, this was the first time they had ever been given feedback on the quality of their touch. And they were very surprised at the positive impact it had on the receiver. Some quotes from the training. I have learned the importance of helping people just by touching them with respect and love. It let me know how to approach my residents, and it also helped me to be more relaxed with my clients. For me, this training is very important because the clients are elderly people who need love, understanding, and patience. And this training taught me the importance of my job. One comment Susie and I heard over and over again, I feel more connected to people. They felt connected to each other in a human way. Think about this. They felt connected to each other. Where in our culture today are we taught the positive effects of compassionate touch? Where are we encouraged to reach out and touch someone in pain? Who teaches us appropriate supportive touch? Who teaches the healthcare providers? Are we taught this in school? Do we learn this in our community, church, or synagogue? If we don't learn this from our family, our elders, our grandmothers, where do we learn the importance of compassionate, supportive touch? Why was this project important to me? This project was not intended to add to the burden of work already faced by caregivers, but rather to nurture and bring out their innate healing abilities. The participants didn't have to take notes, learn a technique, or become certified. Yet they felt affirmed for the kind of work that they provide. Susie and I were able to walk into a room of complete strangers and in less than 1 hour gain their trust, have them interact on a very personal level, which helped them experience the benefits of compassion, presence, and appropriate healing touch. They were empowered to view themselves as important assets within their patient's healthcare team. And most importantly, through this project, we were able to bring touch back to healing.
Before we move to our closing song that Lydia Knudsen is going to help us with, I just want to give a short logistics heads up. After our song, we're going to move across the street to the Center for the Study of World Religions. Just follow the crowd if you don't know where it is. Inside the center, the women who have done projects have set up what we began by calling tables, but evolved into altars that have various paraphernalia and art and all kinds of wonderful things connected to their projects. You may have noticed that there was no question and answer during the program. That's because this program was long enough as is, but there'll be plenty of opportunity to chat with and schmooze with and interact with the women across the street afterwards. Lydia.
And there'll also be food
and food. Yes.
And,
yes.
A festive reception.
Yes.
Well, I had the honor of singing a healing song written by Hildegard of Bingen at the very first meeting of the Women Healing Movement. So I have decided that we can never have enough of Hildegard. So I thought we would all sing some Hildegard to finish our project, Women Healing Movement. I actually came to this idea of us all singing because I forgot my instrument. Not this instrument, but another instrument. So I realized, well, what better way actually to extend our healing experience than have us all sing. So first I'm going to tell you what the text of this song, and then I'm going to have you all stand up and we're going to practice a little bit. This is one of the antiphons. There are about 10 of these shorter pieces that are about God and creation and what He has given to man. Oh, how marvelous is the divine heart which foreknew all creation. For when God looked on the face of man, he saw all his works whole in that same human form. Oh, how marvelous is the inspiration in this way roused humans to life. Why don't you all stand up? So you can think about your participation as a chance to feel the vibration in yourself. Notice that actually as you sing, the vibration goes out in never-ending energy. So I'm going to have you all sing one pitch, like a drone. For lack of a better word. And you can have the drone at 2 octaves, obviously. Let's find you a pitch. Let's see. Let's try this pitch. And let's do the beautiful medieval vowel. So if you can't hear me, it means you're singing too loud. And if you can't hear your neighbor, it means you're singing too loud. However, if you can't hear yourself, you're not singing loud enough. You can stagger your breathing and just keep that going.